Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Today we're going back in time to the 80s. We're going to do a Daiwa 30H, and this one is in beautiful condition. It's courtesy of John out at the Saltwater Anglers of Bergen County, and just asked me to clean it up, which is really clean, and tune it up. It is sluggish, so I'm going to guess that this hasn't been oiled or greased in a while, but it is a nice shelf sitter. So the 30H Sealine, little baby brother, if you will, to the 50H. This one is obviously not in the same condition, but the 50H reel, bulletproof, right? These things were pride of the fleets for years. This one obviously has got a lot of use behind it. This one not so much so, but internally they're pretty much the same reel, so follow along. There is a couple of differences to it, the way the handle attaches and so on. But short of that, great reels, and we'll take this apart. We'll show you what it's made of, and if you have one of these, you'll see how to go about servicing the reel. So we start by taking off the handle. I like to do this while it's on the reel because it gives you a little bit more control and a little bit more leverage in terms of moving the pieces and parts. And then next up would be I'm going to pull the E-clip here, and the E-clip is holding the shaft on for the gear shaft. So let's see if we can't do this with a finger. I think Chester or somebody wrote in and said, you know, is there an easy tool for this? Well, if there is, I haven't found it. But if you know of a tool that removes the E-clip easily, let me know. Most of the time there's not a lot of tension underneath these things, and I generally use just a pick to push it out. And of course you got to watch that it doesn't spring and lose it, because they are what they are. And I just kind of work it out like that. And the reason it's called an E-clip is that it looks like the letter E with that little tag in the middle. There is C-clips that don't have that tag, but at any rate, take care of them. They're hard to find and hard to replace. So next up then is a little washer here, and then we can get to taking the nut off. And this washer typically has a lot of grease on it. Sometimes it'll ride in that little indentation where the E-clip goes. So if it does, just find yourself, give yourself a little bit of patience, and you'll work it off from there. Okay, then we can take the nut off. The nut comes counterclockwise. Grab the handle, walk that off. Then there's the little tension washer underneath it so that the star drag does not push up against the handle. And then we can grab that star drag adjuster off. And underneath that we'll have the two concave washers. Pay attention to how they're set. There's play. These happen to be front to face to face. I'll call it face to face, so that you have a gap on the outside. They could be nested like this, where there is no gap. I just flip that over, and they could also go back to back so that the gap is on the inside. It's all about the tension that the drag washers, the star adjuster has, the play in them. So some is more sensible than others. Since this is the way that it came out, that's the way I'm going to nest them and put them back the same way. Good time to talk about some of the things that we do. I wear a protective glove to keep the grease and grime off of my hand. I also use the parts tray, which is behind me here, to hold all the pieces and parts so that I know where to look. And I also have a good array of tools right in front of me here, so that if I need to find a wrench or a pliers or a screwdriver or what have you, it's within easy reach of my hands, so that I don't have to put the reel down and possibly lose track of where I am in the process. The other thing that's always noted, people are getting tired of me saying, take pictures along the way. As you disassemble this, certain sequences are key, and if you're out of sequence in reinstalling, or you look in your parts tray and you find that you have an extra part laying over, the pictures help you tell when you took it out and what it was. Okay, so we've just released the side plate. The spool came with it. It's probably another reason why it's dragging. And we've got some accumulated grease in there. I think that's going to be a theme here. I think the reel is in beautiful condition, but I don't think that it's been serviced in a while. I'm just going to put a little bit of penetrating oil in there to loosen up that bearing. I'm just going to let it sit and do its work. So then on this side we should be able to pull. We did. And again, I think it's the same thing, just a bunch of dried grease at that point. So let's take the spool and put that off to the side, and then we can continue our disassembly. So we have a bridge plate here. 3 of the screws go through, and then there's one that actually has a little holding nut on it. That holding nut is always on the side where the anti-reverse dog is. The anti-reverse dog has a spring that's attached to the bridge and to the dog. The dog rides on the through screw for the bridge plate there. So if you're wondering why you don't have an anti-reverse or something, check that assembly over there in the way that it looks. Alright, I'm going to take this apart then. There's 4 bridge screws that hold this. On the Daiwa reels, typically these frame screws do not come out. You can pull them out if you want, but typically they don't come out. So let's go over to the bridge plate screws then. Try and find a screwdriver that matches up with the screws. You don't want to use one that's too small in the groove there and wind up flaring it out. So it's good to keep a series of screwdrivers there, just to know that if one would, like the one I just grabbed there, is a little too thin, go to the next size thickness. And this is the one that has the that little nut on it. So what I like to do on the one with the nut on it, put my finger on the back of it. I don't want to lose that nut. It is threaded on the bridge plate. If you lose the nut, no real big deal. But because the anti-reverse is there, they do want to take that extra precaution. And then what I do on that nut after I take it off is put it right back onto that screw. That way I know which one came off the anti-reverse, and I also know where the nut is. Simple things sometimes mean a lot. Okay, so let's just continue then. We'll pull the rest of these screws out. You don't have to worry about the boing factor, if you will, with the anti-reverse dog. That spring isn't going anywhere. It's on the bridge. It's on the screw, but of course the dog is out now. So I should, when I pull this plate off, I should have the anti-reverse dog and that right together there, which I do. So here's the back look of it. This is how you want to put it together. You'll put it together a little bit differently, but this is the way it looks if you're looking to figure out what happened or where you went wrong with something. Okay, now I'm going to reverse. I'm going to remove the anti-reverse. I'm going to remove the jack. I'm going to remove the bridge assembly. I'm going to remove the gear assembly. Again, this is normally you would see, not normally, but in a lot of cases you would see a gear sleeve with a pin that holds it to the bridge shaft. In this case, that E-clip up top was holding it in. So kind of makes it easy to take it off. And when you take it off, of course, you can go do your lubrication on that. And we just have a washer under here. You don't need to remove that washer. That's a washer that's going to sit in. There's a groove underneath here. It's going to sit in on the main gear and center it. You don't need to remove that. Okay, well, I'm going to just take a rag now. Again, we felt it sluggish when we were turning it, so let's get that old grease off of there. I'm just going to use a paper towel for now. I see that there is a lot of coagulated grease on the bridge and all. It's been a while. And when it's been a while, I'm going to do the same thing I did on the other side there. I'm going to grab some penetrating oil. I'm going to just flood that bearing, kind of let the penetrating oil do its work right now. This one is Crc Power Lube. People ask me a lot. I just was given a can of that, so I'm going to use it for now. And whether it's WD-40, whether it's a household brand, liquid wrench, whatever, I find that it's a very useful item to have in the shop as you're working on reel repair, because a lot of pieces get stuck and a lot of grease and grime build up in reels, and it's just a nice common item that goes and does a lot of different things. So it's not going to be the one you're going to lubricate with, but if you want to free some sticking parts, it's a good thing for that. Okay, so I've cleaned these parts up. I'm going to put them in the tray for now. So we have the spool gear. I'm going to check right now. I want to make sure all these teeth are straight, no chips, no bends, no marring. And I also want to check on this side so that there's no unusual wear in those teeth. That one's in good condition, so we're going to be able to reinstall. On the jack, you want to just make sure that the line of the 2 points here coming across, that they're square. You don't want that tag bent one way or the other. Same thing down below here. You want to make sure that they're in symmetry there. And again, flat so that you don't have to worry about that. On the bridge post, the only thing we did here was just set that penetrating oil into the bearing. We're just letting it sit now with that other side plate. So I'm just going to lay that off to the side, and then let's go see what's in the drag stack. So I'm going to believe from the nice condition of this reel that these drags should be in good condition. These are leather drags, I believe. They are in good condition. So these are almost like and if it's not leather, it's going to be like a brake lining, an asbestos kind of a compound. These do not need lubrication. Now, there's some general oil on these right now, and that's fine, but you don't have to go out of your way using a drag grease. You can, but a drag grease is generally for like a leather or a fabric washer that you need to prevent from drying out, and you want to take care to keep it flexible, and that's what a drag grease will do. So in this case, these are a compound that doesn't need that, so you don't need to do that. Okay, so that's it. We've just cleaned that part up. We're going to turn around now. We're going to look at the other part of this reel, which is the side plate. And the only thing I ever find on this side plate that becomes an issue is the eccentric. Sometimes it's sticky. In this case, this is, again, in nice condition. I'm just going to put a drop of oil underneath that eccentric. Just going to use a Penn Precision oil here, but any fishing reel oil will do, and I emphasize fishing reel oil. Please, if you're putting oil into reels, use the fishing reel oils. They just have a different compound in them that general purpose oils. They're built to last longer in the water. Okay, that's all you need to do there. You don't need to grease a spring. Some folks have asked me from time to time. You don't need to do that. And then we're just going to reassemble now. The case is clean. All the parts are cleaned. All the old grease is off of it. If anything, this reel was suffering from lack of grease as opposed to too much or too dry. I'm going to set that down. And then what we'll do here is we're going to grab that bridge shaft. And somebody got me using a brush. I don't use it all the time, but I'll appease the grease gods here, and I'll use a brush and put a liberal coating of grease on there. That's kind of the way it comes from the factory. Once you service the reel, there is an oil hole here, and you could put drops of oil in, but if you have the reel apart, go ahead and use the grease. It'll hold up a little bit longer. The downside of using grease in that position is that if you don't if you don't fish your reels a lot, and you don't generally take care of them on an annual basis, that grease can dry up. I've seen it on a lot of Penn reels, and if it dries up, then it makes the reel go sluggish. So lack of grease will do that, and too much grease and dried grease all kind of contribute to that same cause. Right now I'm doing the same thing I just did before. I'm checking the teeth on the main gear now, putting a little bit of lubrication on it. I'm going to set the main gear back onto the shaft. We have a washer in there. It wasn't necessary to remove that one. I'm going to take the first of the rounded washers. Then we're going to take the second of the drag washers. Then we're going to take the eared washer or keyed washer. It has the 2 points on it. That goes on next. Then we're going to put the top one on. And then we're going to put the top of the rounded washers on. So we're pretty much set with the bridge assembly. We're going to just do the last of the internal parts now. So we're going to take the yoke, and we're going to put some grease right where the spool gear is going to ride. And grab that spool gear, put some grease on that as well. And then we can set the assembly up, and this is always kind of a little bit of a trick, if you will, but we'll get there. I'll probably spill it once or twice before, but at any rate, I like to put the screws in to hold those springs. little bit of a balancing act. But if you put the screws in, you can set the springs on them and not worry about the yoke caving too much. And you put the yoke on, press down your yoke. Now I'm trying to hold the springs with two of my fingers below. That doesn't always work, but that's kind of what the goal is at the moment. Then we can put the jack on like that. Then we can grab the main assembly and try and cover all the bases at once here. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And right now, kind of got it to work. At least it kind of looks that way on paper, if you will, right? There's a stud here that you have to line up. That's what we were just doing. The screws fell out, but at this point that's fine because I was able to get the assembly right. Okay, so then the last thing that's missing here is that, well, we can go ahead and just tighten this to hold it in position. Let's grab one of those screws. All 4 screws are the same, so even though I just had 2 hit the deck here, it's not like a pen where there's a bottom and a top screw. I'm just going to put them in just to hold the assembly at the moment. That one just fell back, didn't fall out, so let's go ahead and put that in. That's just to hold it. Okay, so now where we're going with this, we're looking for the one that's got the nut on it. We're going to grab the anti-reverse dog. Another thing about the anti-reverse dog, I just took the spring off there, but if you notice there's a ridge or an indent on the anti-reverse dog there, that's the one that faces out. And then you just want to slip that behind the assembly. Sometimes the needle nose pliers will help you if you have big hands like I do. Slip it behind the assembly, tilt it up, get the hole roughly in line, and slip the nut in. And sometimes, I think we got it there, get it started. As I mentioned, the first part of that bridge is threaded. I know we're going the wrong way on this. The first part is threaded, so you don't have to worry if you lost the nut. It's kind of a safeguard, but I obviously took the precaution not to lose that nut. So now I'm setting the nut on top where it belongs, and hopefully we've pretty much got that. Just going to check to make sure it's moving up and down. And then I'm going to put the other 2 screws, we'll tighten those up. Kind of going northeast, southwest. This is the anti-reverse dog side. Go over to this side now. Back down to the bottom one. And then we're going to test to make sure everything's moving freely before I start buttoning it up. Okay. And it's turning freely, but guess what? No anti-reverse. Of course not. We didn't set the spring. But that's okay. We just want to make sure that was right. All right, I'm going to grab my little centering pin. I'm going to pull the anti-reverse up. On the spring assembly, I like to put it around the back of this because it is a narrow clearance. So get that in first. Not always easy. Sometimes these needle nose pliers are better than hands, right? There we go. So we've got it onto that arm that's coming over. Now we want to pull this part of the tag over the end here. I use the same pick kind of a thing. Not a high tension spring, so generally you get a lot of play with this and you can do it easily. Just takes a little bit of patience, it always does. There we go. So now we have our anti-reverse working, and it's time to go to the outside then. Before we do that, I want to put a drop of oil. We used penetrating oil before on that bearing just to make sure it was flooded. I'm going to come back in now and I'm going to put real reel oil on that bearing. We also had a little tightness coming out of this. I'm thinking that's probably dried grease, so let's take some steel wool and let's just wipe down that stud on the spool. Make it nice and clean. Get the reel grease and put some on that before we reassemble. And then we also want to put some on the back side of the reel. Okay, we're pretty much set with that. Folks ask me when they service the reel, should they pull the monofilament off before they send it to me. Doesn't matter in terms of myself, but I tell them if you're servicing the reel on an annual basis, get rid of the line. Monofilament line is relatively cheap, and it's subject to UV deterioration with age. And to me, replacing monofilament line on an annual basis is a good idea. Okay, so all the rest of the parts in the parts tray there belong on the outside, so I'm just going to take this now. We're going to mate the two surfaces. And we're going to tighten this up before we go any further. So these are finger screws. You can always work them in by hand. You don't have to use the screwdrivers unless you need to. So we're going to tighten those up. And now we're reversing the process of how we took the reel apart. So the next step then would be the sleeve for the drag tensioner. Then I have those two nested washers we were talking about before. And again, they were opposing. You had the spaces on the outside. So those go on next. Then our drag adjuster goes on. And we have the tension washer for the handle. And we have the handle. And we have the handle nut. And again, if you do this by hand, it's better. You can catch the threads properly. You want to be careful. I have a reel in here for repair that I'm trying to find a nut for, because the fellow who was doing this just decided to get wrench happy and broke the nut. So I think we got that. Now we want that little washer that slides around a lot. That goes over the top. Then the E-clip. And again, just like coming out, with it being the first one, it's the last one in, and it's not easy to do. So I use a needle nose pliers most of the time on this. I don't have the hand strength. Some folks have the hand strength that they can actually pull it down because there's not that much tension to it. That's not me. So what I like to do is get it set in the grooves with the 2 points. Line the needle nose pliers to the back of the stud and the main point. And wait until it clicks. So we're in now. Now's a good time before you do that last step to work on that. And go a whole lot nice and smoother. Got a nice roll to it. We have a little adjuster here we can use. Back that off. Get the right tension there. Oops, we're off to the races. So very nice. We'll put the end cap on now and call it a day with this particular reel. So I know from working on the reels, you want the flat side of this nut to line at a 90 degree to the hole there. Just that way you'll have your set screw in the right place. If you're finding that the set screw isn't sitting, just adjust that nut a little bit. All right, John, this one's all yours to go fishing again. Nice reel, all tuned up, taken apart, cleaned, and put back to order, and all in good shape and ready to go. So I'm just going to leave it the way John did, which is by backing off the drag. That's always a good idea, save the drags. And if you're putting your reels into storage, make sure you do that. One final thing, I know I've been talking a lot, we'll just make sure that these side plate ones, yeah, I got those tightened. Sometimes I talk right through it and I forget that I only hand tighten those, so it's a good thing to do. Well, thank you for watching. This is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. If you like it, please indicate that. I'm always looking for subscribers. If you haven't subscribed, please do that. If you know your friends will enjoy it, please let them know of my channel as well. Again, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Thank you for watching.